parents both passed away, but my mom passed away in 2000, my dad in 2005. But so well before that, my grandmother, my father's mother, had passed away. And I am the only girl in the family, and I was given all of Grandma's keepsakes, a lot of furniture, a lot of the crystal and the things like that. And she did all the paintings in here. I had some, and then I got some more. But one of the things that I ended up with was this big box of letters, and Grandma had saved every letter that both her sons had written during the war. And my uncle, who was about, I think, 2 years older than my dad, he went later as a Marine and went to Guam and Okinawa and ended up in China guarding Japanese prisoners. But my dad was a waist gunner on the Flying Fortress, the B-17. And I was more interested in his story, of course, but I knew, the basics. I knew that he'd been in England, based in England and bombed Germany. And but as I was reading his letters, first I put them in chronological order, and then I would call him. I'd say, okay, what was this about? Who's this person? Stuff like that. And it encouraged him to talk. And he told me, he said, I've never spoken about the war to anybody. And he and his friends, they had gone to high school together, and the women that they ended up marrying, they were all friends in high school. And then all the fellas went to war, different branches of the service. And Dad told me that they had never spoken of the war to each other, never. And he said, after a while, he said, this feels really good. And I was amazed, because all I learned about the war and about his involvement in it, and then reading the letters, it was a 19, 20-year-old kid writing home to his parents, trying to keep them from worrying, but also giving them some information. And then I also ended up reading my uncle's. He had passed away in 75. And so I didn't know him as well anyway, but they lived in Northern California. So I got got more information about him, had a completely different style than my dad. And the amazing thing for me, I love history. And I read the letters from my Uncle Russ, and he's talking about things. It was during when Mao and Chiang Kai-shek were fighting for who was going to have dominance over China. And he was just an observer, but a kid from Southern California who didn't know anything about geopolitics or anything.
Yeah, he was on the ground. He was living it. Yeah.
But he was just observing the things that he was reading about and hearing about. So that was really interesting, besides the stuff about the war, of course, and the battles and whatnot. When FDR died, both brothers commented on it in their letters, hopeful that Truman would be able to finish the war properly. Everybody felt a sense of some fear, but they'd had FDR for so long, and so it was a shock. But they were worried that here we are in the middle of a war. Well, towards the end, but I can hear, knowing my father so well, I can hear through his written words what he was talking about, what he was thinking. And then when I read my uncle's comment on it, it was very similar. Everybody must have just been kind of holding their breath. What will this mean for us as a country and in the middle of a world war? So I got a really great history lesson, great sense of what my dad was all about. So I decided to ask every relative that I could to write their life story, and then to also write about ones that died either before I was born or I was too young to know them. So I put it together in a big album, made copies of everything, and sent it to all the different branches of the family. And uh, and it was, to me, a marvelous accomplishment because everybody said, well, my mom said, I have nothing to say, you know, but ended up writing a book practically.
Yeah.
And my dad, one of his, because I transcribed it exactly how they were writing.
Yeah.
And so my dad said, I didn't think I would be able to write about this, but here I am filling all these pages. So that was a really cool thing. So I can understand when kids are no longer reading, or especially, somebody's account, but they will listen
Yes.
to something. And so to me, it's really valuable what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what I have to say, but I think the idea is a really good one. Well, I think I will start at the beginning.
Let's do it. I love it.
Okay, all right. I'll start with the history a bit. There was a woman named Ellen Church, and she was a nurse, but she also got her pilot's license. And she wanted, wanted to be a pilot, but there were strict rules that only men could be pilots. But she wanted to fly. So she pitched this idea to Boeing Air Transport, which was the prequel to United Airlines, which is the airline I fly for, of having nurses on board airplanes, that it would make the passengers feel more comfortable. Air travel was very new, and she could calm them, and they could attend to any emergencies, things like that. And so they said they gave her a chance at it, and she they had quite a few more duties than being on the plane. Okay, they had to be a registered nurse, weigh no more than 115 pounds, be no taller than 5 feet 4 inches, and had to be single. The age limit was 25. They also had to be able to undertake their rigorous job duties, caring for sick and frightened passengers, taking tickets, loading and unloading luggage, which we don't have to do, helping fuel the plane, of course we don't do that, pass out lunches, then clean inside the airplane, and tightening the bolts holding the seats to the floor. And so they had a lot more. They had some really interesting responsibilities. She earned $125 per month for 100 hours of flying. Now, the planes were much slower, so it was only in the United States. She didn't really go that far for 100 hours. But anyway, gave her a 3-month trial, and it proved to be a success. And that's how flight attendants, how stewardesses became a function like that, that they were a necessary part of the flying experience. And in the 50s, definitely the 60s, and the early part of the 70s, the accent was on sex sells. And so different airlines had different styles. United was the girl next door. The other airlines, like there was Pacific Southwest Airlines, and they wore mini skirts and knee-high boots, and they catered to a different crowd. But that was the image, and so any commercials that you saw, everything, they were selling a brand, and their stewardesses were selling the brand. And so I was grateful that I was working for United and didn't have to wear ridiculous uniforms. There were some really ridiculous things. But anyway, that's how stewardesses came to be on the airplane. Now, my story is I grew up in San Bernardino, California, and I had no. I was smart. I had really good grades. I loved history, but I had no burning desire to be anything. I didn't say, oh, I wanted to be a nurse or I wanted to be a lawyer or anything. I had really no idea. And I studied all those things, but what got me my first job was the typing that I learned in secretarial classes. In the 60s, I graduated in 1966, and there were very few job opportunities, very few career paths that were available to women. It was pre-women's movement. We had just had the civil rights legislation, but nothing was really, there was nothing, the doors just didn't fly open.
Yeah.
Say, here, you can do this, you can do that. That didn't happen. And so secretarial work, nursing, teaching certainly, housewife. Nothing wrong with any of those. I just didn't, I didn't really care about any of it. And I took the secretarial because they guided you towards that. And that was that's what you did. You had to have a way of supporting yourself. And so my first job, I was living at home. I was going to school during the day. I was going to the San Bernardino Valley College, 2-year junior college. And I had a little Volkswagen Bug, and I was in the south of town, and I would go there, go to classes, and then I also had landed a job as the secretary in the counseling office. And so that's what I did. It was an interesting job, not for the work I did, but for my boss. He was a lecherous fool, and his last name was the same as mine. I always thought that was totally ironic, but there was a very large office manager. I forget her name. Never thought I would, but I have forgotten it. Who hated all of us because we were all young and thin, and the boss just leered. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And he would invite you to sit on his lap, and as he was just like taking care of his girls. And, something where I knew it was wrong, knew what the whole atmosphere just sucked. It was really stupid. But there was no one to complain to.
Yeah.
Nothing to do about it. So you just basically put up with it. The other girls in the office, we would talk about it, and we didn't like it. But again, this was my introduction to work. And I thought, this is really weird. And so that job I had for a year. And my mother and I was the middle child. I had an older brother who was a year and a half older than I, and a younger brother who I think is 6 years younger. And my mom and I just, once I became a teenager, we fought all the time. I don't know that it really what it was all about. I was more like my my mom in certain ways, although I did get a lot of my dad's qualities, and I'm grateful for those. Um, but I definitely got my independent spirit, I think, from her. And she wanted to control me more, even though I wasn't running around, I wasn't doing anything wrong, really. Um, but she leaned hard on me, whereas the boys could like do whatever the hell they wanted, and they didn't have the grades that I did. Uh, it was just seemed just not quite right,
Is
but that was the way it was. So what ended up happening is I said, I've got to move out. I can't stay here. And so I had to get a full-time job. My little part-time counseling office thing wasn't going to cut it. I was going to have to work during the day and go to school at night. So I got another secretarial job, and I worked for the manager of the one of the bank chains. I think it was called Security National Bank, I think. And so I got an apartment with a friend. That one didn't work out so well. We are still friends to this day, but she had very poor choice of men. She was always crying. And so um, I ended up uh, moving out, but still not back home. And I I loved my boss at the bank. He was a kind, smart, gentle, well-loved soul. He just was a really good guy. And I was the only secretary in the bank. We had tellers, but I was the only secretary. And there were two vice presidents. One I thought was adorable. He just was really sweet. And he was married to one of the tellers. But the other guy was a jerk. And we, again, just treating me as somehow less than. I remember complaining to my parents, and my dad said, Laura, he's your boss. You got to put up with it. And he's going, I don't want to put up with it. So it was a very tense thing. At the same time, I had two boyfriends, and one I had graduated high school with, and one went to the Catholic boys' school, Catholic high school, and was a couple years older. I can't even remember how I met him, but we dated off and on. So that was Jim, and then Rusty was the other one. And both wanted to get married right then, and I just felt I was too young. I didn't want to choose. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't, as I mentioned, I had no burning desire to be anything, but all of a sudden to be a wife, and according to Jim, a mother immediately, just didn't appeal. I felt they were both pressuring me and they were rushing me. It was like a contest, is the way I always felt. If I went out with one, the other one came over to my apartment, and I shouldn't be fiddling with it's not a necklace, sorry. And would be sulking outside. And if there was the bank had a Christmas party, I couldn't make up my mind who I was going to go with till like hours before the party, and it was very stressful. Now, young women, young men might find that absurd, but this was a whole different time. Roles were prescribed. There were rules and written, probably by your mother, but a lot of unwritten ones in society. And uh, Jim's parents, because I wasn't Catholic, they were upset. Jim was already naming our children,
Oh, wow.
which just scared the crap out of me. And Rusty's mother liked me very much, would have loved me for a daughter-in-law, but she had so many mental problems. She had several nervous breakdowns in the time that in our high school days, and that was real tragic. In those days, they did shock therapy, and San Bernardino has a mental institution. I believe it's still in operation, called Patton, Patton, and she was in and out of there. And our dates were going around to the different foster homes to visit with his half siblings. I guess they're half brothers and sisters. And it was a real sad situation. But again, something that I didn't want to sign on to at that age, not knowing a lot. I thought this, it just seems this is pretty heavy duty stuff. And, I'm only, it was in, well, I was 19, I guess, just turned 19. And so there was I just felt so much pressure. And so I was bitching one day to one of my coworkers. Her name was Joanne. She was new accounts. Real cute, a lot of fun. Everybody enjoyed Joanne. And I said, I want to get out of town and I don't know how to do it. I need to leave. I need to get out of here. I was telling her what was going on, and I said, I don't want to marry either one right now. Maybe later, but maybe never. I didn't know. And she said, why don't you be a stewardess? And it had never crossed my mind at all. I hadn't flown ever. As a baby, my mom took me and my older brother to Denver to visit my dad, who was on a plumbing job, a contract in Denver. And but other than that, I had not been on an airplane at all. And so